getting close to our time. Like I said, you didn't give me much of a choice. He said, you're sitting there, on front row.
And he's right behind me.
I know.
He's got to take the bullet. I need to be down and out. Talking today, we're looking at how we had a high school. It's like this is the extreme opposite.
One thing I noticed is even yesterday, we got warm. It was what, about 7:30. Sun went down. It was cool off in our early.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't. We woke up the farm, it was dew everywhere. It was like, well, that would have been a mess.
Yeah.
I've done that before when I came out and they were on the roof, I just put things fixed, and so of course they shake. Of course they shrink and expand onto the gas, but you can still know what it's doing. There's one in there, it's just right up your face. It's like, yeah, this works so well.
Can't block.
No, not anymore. No. We won't do stuff in the yard. We don't drink 4 times a year. We don't live a lot, but that's what we protect the team. Yeah. We don't need that big bucket.
I've noticed long scale, because I've been 14 years, I've gone through the Appalachian Trail, so I love getting that. We have one tent called Lamb's Corner, we call it Tosh Corner. It's 300 square feet, 3 rooms, it's kind of like, that's for the back of the car and kitchen tent.
Sure.
Cots are out.
Sounds like we're still on that. That was a new one on, they call it Klondike or something.
Oh, yeah.
But in January,
Oh, yeah.
there was snow on the ground.
Everybody has a Klondike.
Well, yeah.
It's kind of hard when it's 80 degrees, but there's been one that's harder and harder to use. Yep, Klondike.
Yeah, I grew up in Cross.
Okay.
And so I want to say I'm like, or Scout Leaders, or whatever, Big Eagle, and graduate high school, and picked it up.
So it's going to all be USD 49 Board of Education special meeting for Monday, October 17th. Order. And the first item here we'll go over, or the first presentation we'll have is Hollis. I'll turn it over to you guys.
Very good. Well, on behalf of Hollis Ability, we thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and present our qualifications and maybe start some communication about how our two organizations might work together. My name is Kirk Horner. I'm president and partner of Hollis Ability. With me today is Kevin Nelson and Michelle Shavy, and they'll introduce themselves a little bit later as we get into the presentation. So don't hesitate to ask questions if there's issues you need more clarification on or whatever, but we do appreciate this opportunity tonight. So, our role tonight, I think it's a little bit different than normal in terms of really we want to just help you kind of get some information about how our firm might be able to work with your community. One of the interesting things is you're interviewing 3 good firms that know schools in the state of Kansas. But what you'll find out as you go through this interview process and talk, we all have a little different ideas about culture, about values, about clientele, and how we approach the overall planning process. So these types of conversations, I think, will give you a good glimpse of kind of how those firms are different and how that might be a benefit and a good fit for the school district. So I want to start off just briefly with just a short video. It's a 2-minute video, a little bit of background of Hollis and Miller in terms of how we approach our project. So does that sound all right? Very good. You hear that?
What are we building for? Don't build me a school. Build me a place for my future. A place that opens up the world.
As we bring a community's needs into a vision and design, it's easy to imagine that every voice is the echo of 1,000 others.
Don't build me a school. Why don't you build me a time machine?
We design for a future of possibilities.
Make it grow as I grow. Make room for everybody and every dream.
Make it inspiring. Give it a purpose. Help me help them.
Great design inspires creativity in teaching and learning.
Connect what I learned to who I am. Don't just design a bunch of boxes.
We need building beyond buildings. Space imagined for customized learning.
Make it come alive. Make it last.
Make learning mean more than it did for us. Make learning more like living.
This is about the legacy of our work. Building beyond buildings means we don't simply make schools. We help build the community and culture that happens in and around them. We co-create each environment with the people it matters to most. We make connections between learning and living. Everything we envision is grounded in what planning and design can do, and what schools and universities must do. It's the full expression of what it means to create space for growth and change. And it's what we can do better than anyone else. Because the future can only be built together.
It'll be amazing. I'll be amazing.
All right, there's a few concepts embedded in there that will kind of reinforce a little bit more in our discussion today. But I want to flip it around a little bit, just real quick, and say, why are we interested in working with your school district, and kind of just give you a little bit of insight. First of all, we've had the opportunity, as some of you may know, to work with John in his previous school district in Harrington, and I'll share with you, I mean, this, in all sincerity, it was one of the most rewarding projects we've ever worked on. And Kevin and I and Michelle had the opportunity, mostly Kevin and I on that one, but to do that, and we enjoyed John. He's a good leader. He had a wonderful opportunity where they've come off 2 unsuccessful bond issues, and we got to regroup, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Kevin Nelson here, some of you may know or may not know, is actually a native of Hayes, and he's heard about Hayes the whole time Kevin's been with us, and this opportunity for an architect to be able to work in your hometown where you went to school is a neat opportunity, and I think it brings a whole nother level of commitment and kind of passion to the project. And also we believe, and you'll hear this term over and over a little bit, that Hayes is a mission fit opportunity for us, a district that understands the value that a planning team, not just the architects and the blueprints, but the value a planning team can do to help the community come together and rally around the needs of the students in that community. So we're excited about that. Our presentation today is kind of broken up into 4 or 5 areas. Just want to give you a little bit of Holliston Miller 101 since we haven't met before. We're going to talk about the concept of co-create. Michelle will explain that, very important. And then community engagement, long-range planning, and then bond support. So we're going to try to get through that in 30, 35 minutes here real quick. But first of all, this is the team. Again, I'm Kirk Warner. I'm partner in charge of the project. I've been with Holliston Miller now 27 years. I've been in educational planning exclusively for 32 years. I can think of no other project type nor other client type more rewarding than working with school districts and communities. One of the things I'm most proud about is Holliston Miller's firm has been around since 1950. But through my leadership in the last 10 or 15 years, we've driven this company to be 100% focused on education. So we'll talk about that a little bit more.
All right, as Kirk said, Kevin Nelson. I am a Hayes native, so it's exciting to be back in town and to discuss our qualifications with you. My role at Holliston Miller is that of client leader. And so my role is to kind of be that conduit between the client and the team. So I would be one of the main contacts throughout any project that we work on together, and then we can the team back to practice to produce them. So I did graduate in 1998 from Hayes High, to Hayes State, and this is my 10th year at Holliston Miller.
I'm Michelle Shavy, and I'm a senior associate at Holliston Miller. Spent my whole career there, and I have a very cool job because as an education design director, I have the opportunity to work with our districts and our clients and talk to them about what they're trying to do from the educational perspective, what types of curriculum ideas they have, how they want to impact teaching and learning, and then work with our teams internally to really support that in the built environment. So it's about discovering where you're headed, maybe where you've been, where you think you want to go, and challenge each other along the way, and it's very exciting to do that with our clients.
A little bit on Holliston Miller. I mentioned we were founded in 1950, which says a lot in terms of the architectural firms in the industry. We have offices in Kansas, Missouri, and Colorado. Again, because we're so heavy in education, 1,600 projects. We're broken up into studios, and we'll explain this a little bit later. Public education, private education, higher education. So people have specific training and task and understand their clients. We have a broad range of services, not just architecture, but interior design, graphics, structural, bond services, the types of things that school districts need to be successful. We say we're a regional practice with a national reputation. We have won several national awards. And what's important about our awards, they come from educators. I think that tells you a little bit about where our heart is and where our focus is. We're not going to focus much on projects tonight because we think this is more of a planning exercise than it is about designing a new school or renovating. But we have elementary experience, 16 new elementaries that are relatively recent. We have middle school experience in terms of, you can see right there, 17 recent new middle schools. And when we talk about high schools, 22 high school projects. So when it comes to experience and projects, we have that covered, but we want to focus on a little bit different tonight in terms of on the planning. The one thing we ask you is, how many people have worked with an architect closely beyond the school district before? Anybody work with? Not very often. So a lot of times when you talk to an architect, you're thinking blueprints and drawings. Our goal is we're much more than just an architect. We want to be a part of the community. We want to help communicate. We want to work on the educational side, the planning side, the financial side. So think of us as a lot more than just your architect, and that's our specialization in education. That's what we bring to the people.
As Coach said, at Holliston, we're 100% dedicated to education. So this graphic up here just shows what Coach just told you, that we have a public K-12 studio, we have a private K-12 studio, and then a higher education studio. So we have 3 studios within our office. So if you work at Holliston, or if you work on those education studios, again, 100% focused on education. I, along with Nicole Young back to our office, co-lead a studio. Myself, I have about 12 people on my team, we're also about 12 on our team. But together we make a studio that then can service some public education projects.
Yeah, the important thing here, we are not general practitioners in architecture. I mean, we are specialists in education as a firm. So we recruit people with this in mind. We train people. Our drawings, our processes are all geared around the unique needs of school districts and the education industry. We have our business model. I mentioned we've been around since 1950. We've just slowly and steadily grown over the years. We're a staff right now about 85 to 90 total. Our business model is pretty simple. It's called We Care. And what it is you take care of your existing clients, service, or whatever it takes, and then you grow slowly by 1 or 2 new clients every year, but you maintain those existing ones. I do a state of the firm every year in January. This is a statistic that we always share. This is 2016, last year. 362 projects through existing clients, 14 projects through new clients. That's our focus. Take care of this, slowly grow this. That's how you maintain your reputation, your quality, and your focus. That's our business model. Worked out pretty good for us so far. One of the ways we think we're unique a little bit is when we talk about diversity of clients. You see school districts down there from 4 to 500, all the way up to 25 to 30,000. We believe that whether a kid's in a district of 4 or 500, or he's in a district of 3,000, or a district of 30,000, they ought to have the same opportunities, because when they get out of school, they're going to be competing in that workplace. So we love working with the small districts. I mentioned we work with John, one of the most rewarding projects we've ever had. So you can kind of see where Hayes is there in terms of the overall mix. There's certain companies, certain firms that really kind of chop off the pursuits that they go after in terms of companies and corporate kind of ideas. We don't do that. We work with any district any size. And again, you see that what we take as being important is the quality of the clients we work with and the longevity, how you maintain that client over the long haul. And that's how we judge kind of our success.
Another thing that's important to us at Holliston is kind of getting back to the community. Last year, we gave away 7.8% of our profit to different foundations and other activities. You see on the screen here is our annual LearnScape opportunity, where we select a school to create a learning environment outside. And so through our 85 people back in the firm, create a build day and design this, and we all go out and work together, shoveling, pouring concrete, doing things together. But it's one way that we like to get back to education.
If you get bored tonight, go to YouTube, hit LearnScape. You'll see 2 or 3 examples of these things. It's a really fun, kind of creative way of giving back, and also kind of helping our folks understand a little bit more about what we do. The last thing I want to talk about here is dealing with the whole concept of construction management at risk. Holliston Miller has, I think, a very strong reputation within the construction industry. and we've been involved in construction management risk with a number of firms since it became legal in the state of Kansas. And I would say if you were to talk to any one of these firms, I think you'd hear pretty positive things about what it's like to work with Hollis Miller. Some firms push back, some people don't like the challenge when it comes to budget and learning. We're just the opposite in terms of we like having that second set of eyes and ears to work with, and we've had a pretty good track record with a number of these. We're actually presenting at the National School Board Conference this year in Denver with the CM at Risk contractor. We've done this for Greenbush and through KASB also. Hollis Miller goes back, the first CM job in the state of Kansas and the third construction management job in the state of Kansas was done by Hollis Miller. So we have a pretty long track record in understanding how to make this work to help the school districts stretch those dollars and get the quality they need and make sure it comes in on budget or under.
So I wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about the next section of our presentation, which is all about co-creation. So co-creation is really the foundation of everything that we do at Hollis Miller. Co-creation and collaboration are really the foundation of everything that we do at Hollis Miller. And those are some kind of fun words basically to describe that we work together at each step of the process to make sure that we create something that we're both really proud of. And it goes far beyond our relationship as you as a client and us as a designer. It also extends into the greater community as well. And this statement, a community will support what it believes in and values, couldn't be more true. We have to make sure that throughout the early part of the process, for both the bond planning piece and then also long-range planning, and also through the design process, that we're engaging some really key stakeholder groups that go from staff and students to the administration to the community, and then to some really hardcore kind of supportive groups. And Kirk will talk about that more in a little bit. Process is big for us, and we try and make sure that as we go through that co-creation process, we're doing that at each step of the way. So our design process is really broken down into 7 different phases. It goes from game planning and pre-launch services all the way to closeout. And so in each of those phases, we're doing a lot of different hands-on activities. And we're trying to make sure that we leverage all of the talents in the room, both from your perspective, because you guys are in this, or educating kids, you're the ones that are really in the trenches with those guys every day. And then also from our side of the table as well. We have some connections with a number of the associations that learning environment. So that's a great way for us to have some connections with us at a national level. For some examples of some new ideas and fun ideas. And then making sure that we use our individual talents in the office to bring a different way to work with you guys. So one example, this is from a project where we wanted to make sure that the folks around the table really had a good understanding of the parts and pieces that we're going together. So instead of just looking at a black piece of paper, this was a great way to start to imagine what those pieces might be in scale to each other. And everybody loves to play with blocks, I don't care how big they are. So we had a little kid moment there, and we pulled those blocks out, and we started to allow those teams to put the parts and pieces together in ways that they were excited about, because it actually brought consensus to the group as we wanted. They could kind of see, you know what, I thought that was a good idea to begin with, but it doesn't work for this team member here. And it was a great way to get everybody on the same page. We want to make sure,
Well, I was just going to say, it's fun to see this. This is Edmond, Oklahoma, the new middle school, the #1 school district in the state of Oklahoma. But there you get principals and curriculum directors all playing with their blocks. But that's how you get ownership in the design, in a process. So we don't have to sell this. They are kind of doing the selling for us when it comes to the design.
And also making sure that we have a lot of options on the table. So these are some examples of long-range plans that we want to make sure we're investigating a lot of different ways to put the parts and pieces together. So whether it's in the design process or the planning process, we want to make sure that we're not heading down one and only path, but several paths, and choose one that makes the most sense. And again, in a way that's very co-creative, in a way that's very collaborative, you can see some dots along the sides of those, they're red and green. Those are great ways to, as a community, as a staff group, as an administrative group, allow folks to sort of cast their vote where they think that should go, and it builds consensus again in real time. So you can see with your peers sharing their ideas, and you can ask folks about it at the same time. So those are just a few examples. We have so very many different ways that we go through our process. We have a long list that we normally have to really memorial with, but a lot of ways to make sure that we have everyone's ability to learn differently and become incorporated. So it's not just flat on paper, it's not just paper blocks, it's not just the pictures, it's moving to person. So it's about finding the right parts and pieces to put together for each classroom.
Yeah, the co-create's the way we learn. I mean, when we get out and mix it up with staff or students or community, That's how we learn and grow as architects and planners also. And it's what makes the project fun in terms of just getting to know community and people overall, kind of mixing it up and hearing what they have to share. I want to talk quickly on community engagement, and you're going to see this little model again. This was started with the school district probably back in 1990, 92, the little DeSoto School District. At the time only had 800 or 900 kids, and now they're 5,000 or 6,000. But how do you get out in that community at all phases of that community to understand what they need? And it was a big strategy to try to help get a bond issue passed, but also help the district deal with high growth or some facility needs that they had along the way. It's built on one statement there: community will support what it values and believes in. And the only way you can do that is to go out and listen, engage, and get their input and be able to take that input and incorporate it in a planning piece so they can see that they're being listened to and how their input is really turning out the design and shaping the design. So the model is really easy. It's broken up into 4 quadrants. The first quadrant is the facility vision team, and the idea there is there's usually a steering committee of some level in this planning process. The goal there is to kind of keep your eye on the big picture of what we're trying to do: learning, schedules, communications, those things that are necessary to keep this planning process. So Board of Education, the administrative team, the demographer, the architect, kind of steering and guiding this process as we go through the way. The next quadrant, we call that the community leadership kind of group. And again, this is the more traditional getting out into community meetings, community forums, senior citizens, county community, those types of things, and engaging them, listening and learning, sharing back and forth to incorporate them into the planning process. The next one, this group's the interesting one we wanted to talk about, FFG, Facility Focus Group. This is in any district. I don't care if you're 400 or 40,000. There's always a handful of people that have a significant impact in that overall community and that school district. And how do we involve them in a meaningful way in the planning process? So we kind of hinted around here a little bit in terms of obviously the university is a big player in this community. The hospital's a big community player. We even put down there Thomas More Prep in terms of we need to involve them in this planning process, give them a reason to want to support what we're doing, give them a reason to understand as a group how the school district already supports them. So we deal with this quite a bit. I wasn't sure about the dynamics in your community, but it's important that we get them involved in a meaningful way into the process and get them to the table involved. But we can hopefully have time to talk about that later. The last section we call BSG, and that is how do we get out with the students, the faculty, the staff, from bus drivers and cooks to teachers, to paras, to principals, counselors, and listen to them and learn. And we spend a lot of time here in terms of face-to-face communication, really trying to understand what are the issues that they need, what are they seeing as future needs, and how can we integrate that into the planning process. As far as collecting input, community forums, one-on-one staff surveys, the electronic surveys, telephone surveys. There's some really new cool methods in terms of using social media to open up meaningful dialogue and discussion, and to monitor that and kind of guide that as you bring in the ideas of the community. It's a very labor-intensive process. It's a lot of one-on-one kind of time, but that's how we can kind of get this information and customize the process really to meet the needs of your school district.
All right, next we want to talk a little about long-range planning and what that might mean for Hayes. A couple benefits for long-range planning. Again, we want to demonstrate and establish some credibility, some financial responsibility, not only with those of us here in the district, but the entire community. We want to look at creating unique educational vision. So every client's different. We're with a lot of school districts. We want to be able to create with you what is unique about Hayes and what's that vision look like, so that as we move forward into the plan, we're supporting what that vision means to you for your students. And then finally, that clear roadmap. So again, looking far enough down the road that as we make decisions today will positively impact decisions we need to make in the future. So we're continually working towards that vision that we created in the district. So a lot of times when we come in to the district, this is what people's opinions and views look like. We're going in every single direction, right? And so our goal is not to make them all exactly perfectly line up like little clones of each other, but it's to get everyone pointed in a similar direction. So they understand what the issues are, they understand what the challenges are, and we're all kind of moving in the same direction, similar direction. So some key issues that we like to tackle during a long-range plan, again, as we said before, a clear plan for the future, setting that educational vision. Sometimes we have to make tough long-term decisions. We need to have these conversations. We talk about them throughout the long-range plan. And it needs to be a reflection. Again, we have done long-range plans for other districts. We don't want to get friends every day. We want to meet with you. We want to meet with your community. We want to understand what's right for Hayes. So So a few ways to look at the long-range plan. There are a couple different types. You might have building specific, so dealing with a very specific, let's say we're only going to talk about Hayes High, what is the long-range plan for Hayes High? Or we might look at district-wide, and we may have an increasing enrollment, we may have decreasing enrollment, but how do we handle our inventory of buildings? What's that look like over 10, 20 years on how enrollment would change or decreases to be able to educate our students? Or it might have a specific focus. It could be some financial or economic grade level configurations that might have a specific focus. So the process is flexible and can be adapted to whatever we need. So as Michelle said before, we're very process heavy at Hollis Miller to make sure that we gain the appropriate input. Long-range plan is no different. We have 5 steps to our long-range plan. We're going to kind of walk through pretty quickly on those. So we want to make sure that the game plan or the process is not moving too fast. We don't want to make people feel like we're trying to growth. We want to take time to get appropriate input. Again, we're trying to get stakeholder involved. But we also don't want to move too slow. We forget what we're doing and die a slow death. We want to keep people engaged and happy and excited about the process. So in that kind of time frame, we want to, as we put together the game plan, discuss what's appropriate, what are the people that we want to get involved to be able to make sure we're doing the right speed. So this is an example from Kansas. At the top gray line here is the game plan for long-range plan. The bottom line here is how we're going to promote that. So Kurt's going to talk a little bit more about the blue line later, but both have 5 steps. And in the beginning, step 1, which is game planning, which is just figuring out what are we going to do, who are we going to involve, what's the schedule look like. This is where we set up the game plan to start methodically planning out how we're going to get out to all the stakeholders that we were talking about.
This one, the election's 22 days away, so it's going to be kind of fun here in the next few weeks to watch how this evolves.
Another unique thing that we've done in the past, so this is an example for Harrington, working with Mr. Thyssen. We sat down at the very beginning of the long-range plan and said, okay, what are our goals and objectives here? What do we need to do to make sure that this is a successful project? And so with those stakeholders, we kind of looked at what are the key things that we need to make sure that we address. For them, it was advantages of the K-12 campus, or a very common one, true cost management, things that look like. And we also wanted to talk about safety and security, and even educational technology, or number 5, that phase plan. Many times, we can't do everything right away. So what does that look like in a phase approach? How is that appropriate?
Again, what was so important about that is that it had 2 unsuccessful elections, so it's like, we need to back up and think about what do we need to do to make this right. And it was very appropriate there. I think there may be some applicability here in terms of really just take a big kind of high elevation look at what we need to do.
So from there, as we set up the game plan, we move into step 2, which is data collection. And so we want to make sure we know what we have to work with before we can move forward. So step 2 is all about getting stakeholder input. It's looking at demographic information. It's meeting with staff, sending out surveys. It's walking through all your buildings, understanding what conditions they're in, what are their challenges, and there's positive features. So that's step 2. As we move into step 3, we kind of set that data collection aside. We know what we have. Set the box aside. We'll come back to that later. But when we get into step 3, this is where we want to create that education. So we're going to create some planning criteria, usually 15 to 20 statements that really help us understand in words what are the district's priorities. So that way when we go down and start drawing on paper, we can go back to those planning criteria and say, are we meeting what we said our priorities were? Here are a few examples of the planning criteria from Harrington. Again, we mentioned some of them in those initial discussions, but community use and collaboration, grade level configurations, or even the bottom one, monitoring classrooms are not a solution. For some districts, that's important.
It's a good way to keep a board, school district, and community focused on the right set of priorities. Because sometimes you get into planning, it's easy to kind of get diverted on little side issues. This keeps you focused. So here's how we do that.
So again, moving on to step 4 of the long-range plan, this is explore options. So this is where we take the data that we collected, we take those planning criteria that we created, and we start putting together what we know and what we decide our priorities are into options to create a long-range plan for the future. And so we want to make sure that we leave no stone left unturned in this process. No idea is a dumb idea. We want everyone to throw out ideas so we can say we looked at it, we've measured the pros and cons, so again, we're making any decisions as we move forward.
Again, at each step, we're going around to that FPG, community leadership, the facility focus group, and the teachers, getting their input, bringing the community along all together through each one of these steps. Again, pretty labor intensive.
All right, so step 5 is just adopt the best plan, not take all those options we explored in step 4, we've talked about pros and cons, we start to narrow it down, we start to run through the sieve, figure out what's the most appropriate option for the district moving forward, and then we usually take a couple options to the board and stuff like that. So again, we want to make sure the long-range plan is certainly not a one-size-fits-all. It's a custom one to A. We want to have flexibility. We want to make sure we're focusing on the need. And again, we're trying to be friendly and collaborative and co-creating with you and your community to make sure that the community can support what the plan focus.
All right, the last one, just briefly, all this planning, all these wonderful ideas, it's kind of a moot point unless we can get the community behind it at some point and have a successful election, right? In terms of, and for us and what we do, it comes down to this. So just a brief kind of overview of how we deal with the bond planning. Why is co-create so important? Why is community engagement important? Why is long-range planning? All those things are building momentum, building trust, so if and when there's time for a vote, you've got the community behind you. The momentum's there. That's why that too fast, too slow is important. You've got to build that momentum as we come through. We have a 5-step process. Again, we're big on process. 5 steps of any successful campaign. Again, from all the way from getting organized to one final push for success. That's where we are in Kansas City, Kansas. 22 days out from the election, we have activities at every one of the levels. We'll work with the community. The important thing, every community is different, and they've got a different history. So you design an approach that meets your community. Sometimes an approach can be too heavy-handed, or maybe it just needs to be grassroots, or maybe it's something in between when we sit down as a group and decide what is appropriate for Hayes, what has worked in the past, where have we had some weaknesses in the past, and design a campaign to make that happen in terms of following up on it. Again, this is a game plan, putting together the long-range plan of what it might look like, and then putting together, starting way back here, starting to get those strategies that are necessary to really get a campaign off a good start if and when the board finally decides to move forward. The other piece, and the role that we play, is somewhat of a conduit in terms of there's only so much a school district can do in terms of saying, please vote, here are the issues, it's fine. The community can say things like, please vote yes, and they need to be able to say, please vote yes, and be able to say the community supports this. Our role a little bit is to kind of be that conduit in between those to make sure some of that message is coordinated and consistent and accurate. So that's one of the fun ones. So here recently, we're very, another election cycle in April. We had 5 bond elections passed. Feel very positive about that. Like I said, I got a big one coming up in 22 days. Kind of excited about that. But this is a fun process. It's not a standalone. It all ties together all the way from the community and the co-create to the planning model, all the way through the long-range plan, right into the overall campaign. So we left a slide here for question and answers. John said we'll probably maybe have an opportunity to talk a little bit more in the future. Anything right off the top, questions you might have or concerns or anything you saw or didn't see?
There's like tons of information in about this session.
Yeah, any one of those, we could probably do a 45-minute discussion. And maybe we'll have that chance, so. But,
I do have one question. Yeah. Early, you ended up having public, private, and then you had higher ed. Can you share what's the distinction in working between, to separate public and private?
Okay. Public is probably about 85% of what we do in terms of public education. When you talk about private schools, how they get their money, their curriculum is totally different. How they organize, how they're run or led is totally different than a public school district. So our language, our architects have to be sensitive to that. So we have a partner who's heavily into faith-based education, and he can speak that language and understand what it's like to be a parent in that situation and correspond. It's just a different game. That category also includes our charter schools, and charter schools, again, a different animal in terms of language, politics, and communication. So it's important that our architects and our client leaders and our educational planner understands and talk differently in those settings. The challenges are different in those settings. So that's it. So I think we have 4 teams in public education, and then 1 each in higher ed and private charters. So that help? Yes. So it's really fun, and people in our office have an opportunity to slide back and forth to what trips their trigger, what they find most enjoyment in, and that's a way of developing our staff and really kind of getting buy-in at the client project level also. Yeah.
I'm assuming that like most organizations, you have to do some sort of continuing education, and I'm imagining a portion of it is architecture based. So like what percentage of any kind of further, this talks about training earlier, about further education is actually about education and about the state of education?
Well, big picture, I'm going to let you answer this one. The big picture we have is called Design U in our office, and that is our kind of in-house training. We have sessions and classes throughout the year. We send people to conferences, those types of things. We have an AMP initiative, an ICP, individual career path, where employees do those types of things. Michelle's involved with that a lot, but on the educational planning side.
Yeah, I actually just completed a certification to be an educational planner for the state for learning team. Greatly learning the learning style pieces, things like that, and how that impacts the architecture side. So tying those two pieces together from a standpoint of sort of acknowledging that the educator is the educator is still obviously that deepest based knowledge that we have, and that looks different in every district too, because every district's interested in making that maybe swinging that pendulum kind of harder than another maybe. So we definitely want to value the fact that the educator is the expert with regard to sort of implementing those curriculum pieces, but then we work really hard to make sure that we have understanding and experience and certification from the side that understands the education piece and tied by architecture. So I just, for example, went to Philadelphia for the International Conference for A4LE and presented there with a superintendent of schools from Lawrence on social and emotional learning. So understanding the impact of the education from the curriculum side, both the physical sort of manipulative math reading center, but then also just the social emotional impact that kids need in the spaces like now. So we're trying to make sure that we have a deep understanding of that from a lot of different levels, because it helps us have better conversations with the folks on the other side of the table, and then we can sort of challenge each other, because we can say, well, we've had other experiences with other districts and other things that are completely different, and then also help apply things that you already have the real community.
I mean, that same presentation you just gave in Philly is actually being presented at our office on Thursday. So everybody in the office knows what's going on with learning. I'll give you another example. A district Kevin and I work with, the director of special education next month's coming in to talk to our entire staff. Where special ed's going, what are the challenges, what are the issues, how do we look ahead. So because we're focused on education like this, it allows our training to be kind of laser-like in terms of what we're doing, and who we bring into the office, and what associations we get involved with, and those types of things. Does that answer your question? It's, again, it's one of the benefits of not being a general practitioner. We can really focus in on what's important.
There is a base strategy.
Yeah.
Is there an additional cost for us, or do you think that probably costs?
I really don't think so, because, we get to ask that question all the time. Now, one of the things we talked to John briefly, we have 2 offices in Kansas City. The November 17th, we're turning into 1 office in downtown. Once we do that, we have an office that will be open in Wichita. So that, Hollis Miller's always stuck to 180-mile radius, because that's what our processes are labor intensive. We spend a lot of time, so we've got to kind of respect that 180-mile radius. Have an office in Wichita will allow us to maintain that 180-mile radius. We also have an office in Castle Rock, Colorado, that hits both Colorado Springs and Denver, so within that 180-mile radius. Cost-wise, it would be reflected in any contract or anything like that. So that's the part of being in the school business. So a lot of board meetings at night, a lot of time on the road. If you want to be in schools, that's what you do.
Kevin's folks have offered to
I was
let
gonna
us
say,
out.
Yeah, we got free room and board right here. I'm not sure who's excited about that.
Yeah.
We got free room and board.
Mom and Dad might be not, yeah.
I want to end up sharing that it's very likely there will be more questions.
Sure.
It's just a matter that the questions may be from this presentation. The other 2 presentations may jog some more questions for all 3 of the architectural firms, and we'll make sure that those questions get funneled and we get the answers. We will end up making contact with all 3 firms again as far as visits, and so this isn't the end. This is just the front end. Okay.
Hopefully. Very good. Out of respect for your time and the 2 other firms out there, we'll stop it tonight. We had some good reasons here, but thank you for the opportunity. We look forward to addressing more of your questions and getting to know you. Again, you got 3 good firms out there. They all do schools. They know how to do that. For you, it's find out which of those firms is going to represent you out there, which of those firms are going to be comfortable out in the community, mixing it up, and hopefully through these meetings and processes, and be able to kind of figure out which of those teams that's important. But thank you for the opportunity. We're certainly excited. Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Like a free performance and
We are set.
Well, he said he just put this in because he's on the side of the same, so that's why you're on the right side.
this is from my height and not Terry's. Yeah. Can everybody hear us okay? Am I just talking? Well, good evening. Thanks so much for having us and inviting us in tonight to give you a little bit more understanding about where SJCF architecture comes from and what our services are and what kind of qualifications that we have that we can provide for you to help you reach your goals in the next step of your process. My name's Dana Taylor. I'm with SJCF Architecture. We're out of Wichita. This is Terry Wiggers. He's our Senior Vice President. And this is Rick Brown. He's an associate with the firm. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background about our architectural firm. Just to give you an idea, we've located in 3 different offices across the country. We've got one in Albuquerque, we've got one in Austin, and then Wichita. This is what I like to consider our Wichita family. I've been with the firm quite a while now, and I really do look at them as a family. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. And this firm is a little bit different because they've all had a lot of longevity at this firm. And when I say that, I'm talking about Rick, for example. He's been with the firm since 1994. These are getting to be a little bit more unheard of, especially in our industry. Terry's been with the firm since 1985. And it's not uncommon when I came to this firm on our monthly staff meetings that we're celebrating 10 years as like a youngster. And then just recently we've been celebrating like 40 years of people being there for a long time. So that kind of gives you a background on, they make people happy. It becomes a pretty tight-knit group. We're all pretty close and we all work together really well. It's more like a family connection than it is, that's how I like to consider it. It is like a professional team, but we're also really like that with our clients as well. We like to look at them as more of an extension of our team as well as an extension of yours. When we get to meet you, we become friends. When we get to work with you, we get to see all the bad sides of you, and you get to see all the, early morning meetings or late night board meetings. You get to see it all, we hear it all, especially when we get to working closely with your communities. We get to know the ins and outs and the nitty gritty. But that's what we like to hear. We want to know the goods and the bads too. Who are we? SJCF Architecture started out as a two-man firm. It's been around for 60 years. That's 6 decades of architectural design. That's a long time. In our industry, we've gained a reputation around our region for doing school work. We do lots of different kinds of work. It's a very diversified firm, but for a long time, for decades, they've done mainly schools. 70% of the workload that we carry are educational design projects. 90% of our workload are repeat clients. That tells you again a lot about what we do for our clients and the longevity of our employees, our staff, our families, and also our repeat clients. So that's something that we're pretty proud of. We pride ourselves in the quality of service that we do. We're very passionate, and we're very serious about helping out our clients and helping you reach your goals. Like I said before, our team becomes an extension of your district.
I'm going to take it from there. I'm going to say, respond to that. Say, why would we even say something like that? The reason is because our team is different from no other. I've watched this process develop the past 3 years and be part of this process. Not only that, I'll explain a little bit more why I say that. But what our team does is we listen to you fully. I don't mean just to say that. We listen to you really intensely. We all work on master plans for our own school districts with our own kids there. So we have an understanding of what your goals are, but the same that we are all dealing with all of our kids. So we don't look at this as a job we want to get. We want to go through the process. We want to help you get the building built and then move on. Go ahead and continue to move on. We want to be your partner for life. And, we want your kids to end up in the facilities that you envision for them, just as you do. Just as I want my kids to be in the facilities I envision for them. We are different because several of our people have ties to the Hayes community. My family lives here. Another architect that couldn't be with us tonight, he graduated at Hayes High School. Dana has connections. We have multiple people with connections to this community, and we love it. I'm here quite frequently. And so, what I guess I want to say is that the people that work on your project, if you so choose to move forward with SJCF, will be working with you, but we've not just done this before as a job. We've looked at this.
We get excited about most jobs, but this one in particular, we really do, because we're like, yeah, we would love to be traveling here and be connecting with the people we know here. So,
okay. All right. So, a few questions. One of them, why do bonds fail? Our team has developed a process that's evolved from several years of experience working with districts across the state. And we continue to refine that process meeting after meeting after meeting, discussion after discussion. We improve upon it every time. And we're getting pretty darn good at it. The more involvement we get from a broad range of community members, the greater chance of a successful bond plan passing. And from our experience, bonds tend to fail when one or more of the components that is part of our master planning process isn't there. We've actually identified that. We can look back and see, well, we didn't really have that, or they didn't really have that. So, look at the quote on the slide. It talks about, it's a quote from one of our superintendents we work with. In particular, we appreciated communication advanced planning, and on-time performance from SJCF. That communication work is the biggest thing here. And you'll hear that talked about throughout our presentation, but that's what we really strive to achieve. Why do bond issues pass? Well, we believe that an interactive, engaged process where everyone's opinion is considered in transparency and communication are at the forefront of the process. This process that we use develops community trust and support through participation and transparency. And we don't mean that we just talk to the people who are invested in the groups. We talk to everyone. We want to talk to community leaders, staff, faculty, the people who voted no last time. We want to engage them with this process. It's not that they said no when they voted because they don't want kids in snow shelters. That doesn't make sense why people would say that. There's something else that we need to find out and figure out what it was that may have left them before, and we move on from there. Okay, next we call the number slide. Upper left corner, over 1,000 successful projects done by SJCF. That's quite a big number when you think about it. And each of those projects involved a lot of work. Some of these range from anywhere from a $20,000 remodel up to a $60+ million new high school facility. 26 bonds passed in the last 10 years on the lower left. Those range from anywhere from $3 million to $370 million. And $1.65 billion combined since 1989. So, I guess what I would say is from our experience, we've learned that bonds succeed when all of the components in the process we're about to outline are addressed and the community's been part of that. And we gain their feedback through the master plan process before you go to the board and press that. Okay, what sets SJCF apart? Well, first of all, you see the upper slide. The upper row of the slide says pictures of people. People asking questions. This represents what we do really well, community engagement. In fact, a couple pictures of what we're actually talking to the community. That's a critical part of what we do. The second group of slides just gets a little bit of information we'll talk about later about our process. You know, not only do we take this with you from the very get-go as you look at master planning, but we take that and we move forward all the way through the process. The same people that will be talking to you when you're saying, hey, what do you want, are the same people that are going to be working with the contractor until the very day you occupy that building. The bottom row of slides just gives you an idea of a small review of some of the factors of effective planning. You know, whether it's HVAC, electrical, site issues, all the way through implementation of technology, how you want to in your facilities. We'll look at it all. However, what I really want to strive to let you know is that we want to be your partner for the long haul. Not only after you've gone through the process, your buildings are complete, the work's done, but after you've occupied that, and after you've occupied it for a decade, 15 years, 20 years.
Let's talk a little bit about our philosophy. We believe wholly in engagement and interaction and transparency in the process of master planning. And we utilize just about every method and process that you can think of in order to make sure that that communication that Rick talked about, that engagement, is open and the community has a part of that. Back in 1990, myself and a couple partners developed. Prior to that, if you passed a bond issue, it was you just put it out there and vote. In 1990, we were faced with a challenge of a very hostile environment after a couple of failed bond issues, and we thought, now what do we need to do to solve this? Because we've been hired to come in and try it for a third time. And we decided, you know what we really need to do is go out to the community. And how do we do that? We developed what began as a community engagement process, but has grown over the last 26 years into what we have as kind of our model process, which we then customize to each individual community. but it's built around every type of communication that you see on this slide, and then some. And the whole idea behind this is that we will build a process that everybody has a say and has a voice in, so that we not only get the information from the community, but they also know they're getting information back from us. So let's talk a little bit about the structure that helps us do that. It's really centered around the Community Steering Committee. And we really believe that that Community Steering Committee needs to represent every demographic in the Hayes community. It needs to represent that farmer, that pawn shop owner, the person that's chairman of his company, et cetera, as well as your parents, your staff, and can't express that enough, that it's got to be a nice cross-section, because we need the people that may even be negative about it on this committee. The reason is that committee is going to determine the master plan, so they need to consider all input and opinions. Go back a second. We use education spec committees to do that. This is comprised greatly of your site councils and staff. They look at the need. The school planning teams will then look at solutions. All of that feeds into the steering committee, who then develops the master plan for Hayes and then submits that to the school board. So let's start off with the process. And in order to make this a little more clear, we're going to take you through kind of the 8 basic steps that we'll use to get the community engaged. So instead of just a diagram of structure, which means nothing to you, we'll walk you through. So I'm going to let Rick start with step 1.
And some of these steps, we'll find that we go back and forth a couple times. We're not quite through this one, so let's go back a step. So we'll get to that. The kickoff meeting. This is a process that takes probably 2 full weeks, but it's basically getting together your board and your administration. And what you do is you establish the goals for the master plan, the tasks that you want to assign to the steering committee, and review and customize the process to meet the needs of USD 49. So you also talk about who would be best to represent you as a school district and as well as the Hayes community on that steering committee. Next slide. The steering committee itself. From the kickoff, we will help you establish this committee and get the right people involved. And we engage the steering committee and establish tasks for them, review the process for success. That's what we call this master planning process, for basic steps, the process for success. And we establish steering committee goals. And this committee is going to be with the process for quite a long time, so it's a decent amount of time commitment. But they are key elements.
Typically, this committee will meet once a month for 6-8 times, so 8 meetings. And sometimes it goes up to about 10, depending on the community feedback and whether we need extra meetings to discuss that.
This slide just gives you a few of the questions that you may be receiving. By the time we get going, you should have some steering committee members that actually know what they want to say and react to some of these questions. And by the time we get through the process before we really start taking it to the community, everybody on the steering committee will know exactly what we want to answer to these questions.
If you remember, the top row is your education specifications team that I talked about. This group will start looking at your needs, like, do we need storm shelters? If so, how many? These numbers up here represent, we've done 40 storm shelters in 9 school districts in the last 8 years. So we've done plenty of shelters. They've ranged from classrooms, cafeterias, gyms, band rooms, you name it. If it can be an educational space, we have figured out a way to make it a shelter. What that means is when you start looking at spaces in your district that you need, and identify them, we can turn those into shelters, so we kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Also, we'll look at, they'll look at security and safety, controlled access, intruder hardware, all those things that you're concerned about. You have an outline building that needs to be linked so they don't have to walk outside, those types of issues. And then, of course, deferred maintenance, whether it's parking lots, HVAC, Roofs, hate to say roofs, but it's always a dangerous topic in deferred maintenance. A number of pieces of the district and energy efficiency, et cetera. We'll look at all of those as part of that education specs and facility specifications team.
Staff meetings. We find it critical to meet with staff. And I'm not just talking about anybody. I'm talking about all staff members that would be impacted by this process. Even the buildings where you're probably not touching. You want to hear what people have to say. You'll probably meet with them from any time between 2 and 4 times as we go through the master planning process. But once we get involved in the projects, we'll meet with them. Why do we do this? We really believe that you can define the best solution when you're talking to the people who will actually be occupying the space and understand how it directly impacts the students.
One thing I was going to add there, both the ed spec teams and these staff meetings occur concurrent with steering committee meetings while they're learning about other parts of the district, like how it's financed, how that works and all that. So it's all happening seamlessly. So by the time the steering committee is ready to hear from them, we've got all these reports ready.
As we develop concepts, we're going to be looking at several things. We're going to be talking about floor plans and layouts, and it's not out of line for us to have anywhere between, sometimes 8 to 12 revisions before we finally get to something we all like. But what we do is we explore all these alternative options. We'll start with what you did with the previous study, and then we'll keep adjusting things as we go. We'll look at it from dollar standpoint, uses standpoint, safety standpoint, everything. Just to give you an example of things that we look at, if you determine that a school needs to have a 10-classroom addition, and you also have a shelter that you want to build with that, it doesn't make sense to build a very expensive shelter for all 10 of those classrooms. Maybe your student body and staff can fit into 3 or 4 of those rooms. You design those 3 or 4 rooms efficiently, effectively for that storm shelter. The rest is conventional construction. So we keep in mind a lot of things as we go through this process.
This step goes back and forth between that second row and the structural diagram of planning teams. They look at solutions at their individual buildings. They take them then to the steering committee, who starts looking at them as groups of projects in a larger view. From there, we try to get down to a manageable number of options that we're looking at. Maybe it's only 2, it could be 2 to 4, and the steering committee then takes us to the community and starts having community meetings, and that's where we get into all the different mediums, whether it's neighborhood coffees, whether it's organizations in town, whether it's town hall meetings, etc. We'll do whatever it takes to reach every facet of the community. We present the 3 options, and we give them a chance to give us feedback on what they like. It may be surveys, it may be a handout where they just jot a few notes. We try a little of everything so we get a very comprehensive feedback. And we may go through this process twice. I'll mention that after Rick talks about the next step.
Okay, we refine concepts. When we get to this point, we evaluate with the steering committee as many of the options as necessary to make sure that we've covered all of the feedback that we've collected from all of the various groups, parents, teachers, administrators, staff, the community itself. So these concepts they evolve from the direction that we've gained from both the steering committee and the community and all these pieces and parts. So we work it towards a master plan, and that master plan may not necessarily be exactly what you put out for a bond if you were to do that. Sometimes the master plan shows what you'd like to see for the district 20 years down the road or further. But if it doesn't make sense to do things, pay for things that you don't foresee happening for the long range. So we'll master plan it, and then we look at what you need to do for that long time. If that makes sense.
I might mention that if we end up coming back and refining the concepts and still think we're not real solid on which one of those the community wants, we can loop back and do 6 and 7 again. Make sure we have it right before we go to the step of preparing our final master plan, looking at how it might be phased if it's larger than what we think we can afford as a district, and then putting it together and presenting it to the school board. So once we've done that, The next step then, obviously, if the school board were to decide we're going to go to a bond issue, we have a structural plan or a structure in place. We like to see that as many of those steering committee members continue on. They understand the project. They're really invested in it. A lot of them want to stay on and be part of this committee that helps spread the message and develop the campaign for the community. You can see we've got 5 kind of basic subcommittees that work there, from voter registration. There's a group called Information Central. They do the message. Publicity does the speaking and materials like that. There is a speakers bureau, and then, of course, if you have any yes contingent, that has to be separate money from any school money. So there's a fundraising component as well. And then you can see we try to go out to all these different groups and get that message out and listen carefully to make sure they get the facts and not anything that's misinformation.
And along those same lines, when it comes to the process of bond promotion and everything, that's where we come in to support you, and we kind of become your extension of your district. These are just some examples of your promotion or marketing materials that we can help support you with. We have in-house graphic designers. We have an in-house marketing team. It makes it really easy for us to help you develop different methods and means of communication to your communities, just to get the word out of what's going to happen, get it into media or printed materials. There's all kinds of different methods that we've used, and we've mentioned it, well, it kind of depends on what your community is like as to what approach we might take, what one makes more sense for your community and the people, the parents or the residents. And just depending on how your community temperature is, will kind of depend and lead what method we use to communicate with them. But really the whole point is to bring the community in to get knowledge and informed about what is going on, so that eventually they'll be informed enough to make a wise decision when it comes time to vote.
Bottom line is we'll do it all for you.
Yeah. So these are some examples of some of these methods that we've developed and helped support, which is we've done voting buttons, we've done yard signs, we've done flyers, we've done brochures, I mean, all kinds of things. And like I said, it's endless as to what we can come up with with you, but these are just a few examples that have worked pretty well in the past.
Okay, just to emphasize our successes, this is a list from 2000, what the bond issues that we've passed, both between us and our outreach office, since 2000. So I want to point out that many of these bond issues are repeat clients. Some of them up to 4 bond issues on this list. And these clients have been with us for a quarter of a century. So we've got the track record. We've developed the process pretty well. This also, you may want to ask, so what are the reasons why some things may not pass? And I just want to tell you that, when we go back to our process, a couple of those things are, one, if you were to move through the process very quickly, the community, the staff, for whatever reason, maybe there's a goal you have to go to, you want to get to a certain vote. If it's pushed too quickly, the community won't be ready for it. Also, if you don't have staff behind you, and you don't have your facilities people behind you, that could be a big problem. Also, the timing. If you try to time a bond issue with any relation to another taxing decision that's been made in the community recently, sometimes that has a negative impact. So these are just a few. Next. Okay, back to our number slide. Again, 26 bond issues passed in the last 10 years. In the last 15 years, we have a success rate of over 90%. 18 licensed architects in campus. That's basically half of our office in Kansas. So people who work on your project have the experience, and they will be with you from the very beginning, from the first meetings all the way through the last time outlets plugged in the wall.
Once you've passed the bond issue, one of the things I know you're very interested in is construction manager at risk delivery process. We actually started using the construction manager at risk process about 8 years before the state of Kansas approved it as a delivery process for schools, and had done a number of projects that way. and learned a lot of lessons before that happened. So as we've gone along, we have developed all the materials you need to navigate through the procurement process. We basically will do it for you and help you through it, so that, because we keep up on that legislation, et cetera. But you'll see here, we've done construction manager at risk projects that range everywhere from $5 million all the way to 680, I think there's 70 million, 66 million. Most recently, we just finished the Southeast High School in Wichita, which was the first CM at risk project that district had done. I think it was 60 million. So the bottom line is, we are very comfortable with it. We still do bid jobs, yes, but we're very comfortable with the CM at risk process. We're also very informed to protect you from some of the things that can happen in that process. The other thing that we used to do before the CM at risk is our firm was known for doing our own project management. Instead of you having to hire a project manager, we would actually break the project into packages and administer it and monitor it for districts for many, many years. We still have that ability. So scheduling, critical path, budgets, you name it, we still have that ability, and we still use that expertise to make sure, as we bring a CM at risk on board, that we're keeping an eye on what they're doing and a second opinion for you as they come on board as well.
And just to let you know that you can have confidence in our ability to execute what we talk about. After the bond issue is passed and everybody's happy and we decide it's time to get going, we are all still very involved. We're involved with the staff and with the committee. Again, school boards, we can come back multiple times with different options until we get things right, redefining what we're trying to get to. And, for example, we are cutting edge of technology by using programs such as Revit that allows us to start with the same concept at the very beginning that we show you with diagrams. Start out with a line and change it to a wall. Gradually, you start adding structure, outlets, fire alarm poles, all those kinds of things. It's the same thing from the beginning to the end. If you do a CM at risk project, by the time the building is actually built, it may be the third time. You start with what we design, and we refine and work with our consulting engineers, and then it moves into the CM construction manager's realm, where they build it again a second time, often using products that they decide to use. We look for conflicts, and then that's going on at the same time as being built in the field.
And part of the reason Rick says that is because it has conflict detection in the software. So if there happens to be a pipe hitting a beam or a duct hitting a pipe, it actually flags it. It's a database-driven software, and like Rick said, we were the first in the state that committed 100% of our staff to converting over from AutoCAD to Revit, which is a 3D database software.
And that kind of gives you a really quick overview of some of the services that we provide. We know we're on a little bit of a time schedule here, but just to remind you of, our firm provides services, and we have for decades of time. And really, the bond planning and master planning is really kind of our niche. It's been our process that's been developed from, of course we have failures, and that's where we learn from. We develop and refine our process so we get less and less that are unsuccessful, to the point now we're at a 90% success rate. So we like working with communities like yours. We like to find out reasons why it maybe didn't work. There's usually different methods that we've learned along the way to prevent that from happening again. And we would really we really enjoy working with your community and your district to help you along the way so that you can pass a successful bond. We'd love to open it up for questions. I know we don't have a whole lot of time before, but yes.
Question. In order to bond, did it pass the first time, or you guys got it the second time?
That was actually the second time.
So what did you do, or what did they find different?
Well, what we found there was that the community really wanted to kind of hold on to the community engagement process quite a bit. So I think that may have impacted it a little bit, but also they were following up right on the tails of another large election, which they ended up adding a tax for a brand new swimming pool. So a lot of
And when he
the
says,
notes were like, well, the pool killed the school. Well, then we came back and we did it again, and it was fine.
One thing I would note, when we do a second bond issue, you pay nothing. Our commitment is to pass a bond issue for you no matter how many times it takes. And each time it fails, we're going to go back and find out what, through survey process, et cetera, engagement process, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to find out what it was that was the objection, solve that, and then put it back out. Normally, we pass it on a second try if there is a failure.
so you can see why we don't want to have it fail. We're invested in it.
We have a vested interest in passing it for you.
So we're just as determined. And like Rick had said, we've had failures along the way, but there are reasons, and typically you can go back and pinpoint why, whether it's the administration that has their own method that they want you to follow in the process, or whether it's the community that wasn't involved enough. Like Rick had said, there were some restrictions on community involvement because of some of the opinions of various people on the committees and things, and so that can have a factor in it, as well as an election year. It's in our industry. It's just an election year is not a good year to vote for one. There's too many
Especially
unknowns.
this election.
Yeah, this one nobody wants to vote for anything right now. But
Being a Western Kansas kid, that I know exactly why they were wanting to do that, because they don't want to have the big city people come in and try to tell them what they need to do with their school. However, we do have the expertise, and so we really want to. If we think you're making a decision that may not be beneficial, that may be going against something in the process, we just need to really be
We're going to talk it out with you.
We'll be honest with you.
Because we have found along the way that, this is a refined process, and if there's one element in this process that is lacking, that's kind of detrimental. It does not really work if they're not all cohesive and you're not using or looking and identifying and working through all of these different steps and variables.
Let me throw a quick example. Belle Plaine just passed this last year. They failed the first time. They hired us 110 days before they wanted to do the bond issue. Well, you have to send your bond issue to the state 90 days beforehand. That gave us 20 days to come up with a solution for them. They ran that thing through. The community felt, one, they didn't get the input of the middle school staff. Their building was key to that. Two, they went so fast the community felt like it was rushed, and it failed. They came back and said, okay, we give up. You guys do your process. And it passed like 2-1 the second time. So that was a component. Speed was a component as well.
I know it's repetition with each group, but I just want to share again. Questions and answers, we will make sure that questions are relayed. We will be going to Wichita at some point to visit. So we will gather questions and try to make sure that we get the information that we need in trying to make our decision in the next month or two. So I do appreciate very much your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
We really look forward to hosting you in Wichita and sharing some things with you. Thank you very much.
We won't have cameras. I need practice on that. It just shakes me up. I'm like, okay, work through it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
you sat through an hour of architectural presentations not working?
Maybe.
Is everything on the record tonight, meeting table? Yes. I'll make sure.
That's not your way, that's a
Whenever you're ready, right? We are ready.
Thank you for having us here tonight. We're very excited to be back here in Hayes. I brought a few more people with me tonight that I'd like to introduce you to that will be working on the project. I'm Amber Beverlin. I am your principal in charge and your project manager. So that means the buck stops with me, so to speak. It also means I get to tell these guys what to do, which is I probably enjoy a little bit too much. So a couple of the things, Jim French is our educational planner. He's been working in education for over 25 years. He's our global sector leader, and he's recognized nationally and locally in the state of Kansas for his expertise in education with educators and architects alike. Troy Wade and Don Fuller make up our bond consensus team. So they lead that team of many more people we'll talk about in a little bit. So John's got over 30 years of running bond campaigns, and he's worked on school boards, and so they really understand the process, and we'll talk through a lot of what we show tonight is their expertise in bond projects they've gone through. So back in the office, we've got a ton of people behind the scenes also helping and dedicated working on your project. We are a full integrated design firm, so that means, unlike the other ones you've heard tonight, we actually have all our engineers and all of our designers in-house working at DLR. So what's that mean to you? I don't have any consultants, so everyone is going through me, and so you have one point of contact, and again, the buck stops with me. So you got one person you have to work with, and that's it. Under the second grade bar, I want to just point out that is our bond consensus team. So those are the people dedicated to working to pass bonds. So they work with John and Troy every day, and John will talk a little bit more about what keeps them busy and all the pieces and parts that they're working through. I could probably spend the entire 35 minutes tonight just talking to you about all the different projects that we've worked on and where our experience lies. These are just some of the auditoriums we've done. We've worked, from the Kennedy Center to Broadway. We've done Jim's auditoriums that you've probably been in before, and some of the other people in your conference. They're very complex spaces, and no one else has the experience that we do working on those. And gymnasiums are the same way. We have more experience working on gymnasiums in the state of Kansas and around the world, really, than anyone else you'll talk to. I know you had a cafeteria common space, including your bond. Here's just a couple pictures of some of the ones that we've done around the world to make those multi-purpose type spaces that really can become even engaged learning spaces as well. And I can't talk enough about the career and technical education experience that we have. We know how important it's become to educators and school districts around the world, really, especially in the state of Kansas. And we've done many, many hundreds of thousands of square feet of career and technical education spaces. And every project that I've worked on since 2005 has included some safety and security component, similar to what you have included in the June bond election. It includes everything from safety and security into tornado shelters. We were the first in the Joplin to help them rebuild after their tornado. And I bet you can't tell which one of these pictures is a tornado shelter. It's a trick question. There's two actually left of us. But really what I need to focus on instead is this picture. It may not be as pretty, but it's way more important in terms of what we want to talk to you about tonight. The most important thing that you need to do is find someone who can help pass your bond. And that's what we do. We've worked on over $20 billion worth of school bonds in our history. This team here in front of you has worked on $1.8 billion worth of school bonds just in the last 10 years. So they're bringing that depth of experience to your project. Every red dot is a school district that we've worked in and been able to pass it on. I don't think anyone else talking to you tonight has that depth of experience. So how do we do that? We've got kind of 3 steps we're going to go through tonight and talk to you about. Our data-driven process, how we can help develop that correct vision for Hayes, and our proven bond process, we can get that bond passed. And something we've got up here to show you is our collaborative planning process. So we're really going to focus in on talking about all of the beginning, because this is where those pretty pictures were, and you can see how little it is on the board. We've got to get through steps 1 through 5 first. This is the essential piece. So while some people may talk to you about their design process and what's it look like when we get into design, we want to talk to you about what's all happening before then until you get that funding, and then we can make your project a reality. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to John.
You know, one of the important parts about building consensus is that you understand the scope of our work is so much before you get to an election. You can find a lot of firms that can create pretty pictures. We're talking to some tonight, they're a pretty good architectural firm. We really are much different in that regard. We spend a lot more time and energy up front helping build that consensus and do that plan, because as we know, without successful election, there's no pretty pictures to be done. We also know that taxes are a big deal in the state of Kansas. Matter of fact, in this case, Amber is so excited about this project. She's native of the area. Her family lives here in Hayes. So I'm not talking about somebody that's going to hear firsthand about raising your taxes. It's going to be the lady that's in charge of this project. So the first time somebody stands up at the community and says, hey, I'm paying these taxes, she can say, yeah, well, that's my sister right there. She's paying them too. Also, the other key we want to talk about is how do we build that consensus? And it's done through data-driven. It has to be through a lot of data. You're going to hear a lot, I'm sure you heard a lot of firms talk about hyperbole in terms of building consensus and getting the community engaged and talking to the right people. Get it. That's low-hanging fruit today in school bond elections. Today, bond elections are successful by being data-driven and understanding the voter and the electorate and what they want to hear, what they want to buy, and ultimately how you're going to sell it to them. We're going to walk you through that. I'm not an architect. My degree's in business and marketing. I've been in DLR for 30 years. I'm a senior partner in the firm and live in Kansas. I've served on 2 school boards here in the state of Kansas. I know what it's like to sit up in front of a school board meeting and take pot shots for taxes. So we know the kind of words and the way to actually give you the data to actually justify tax increases or to justify the reason the scope is in a bond issue. So we do that through some of these tools we're going to demonstrate tonight. So you got in front of you one of those clickers. How many times have you sat in a meeting and somebody doesn't say something in the back of the room, but they're probably the most influential person in the room? Happens all the time. We use these, they're called turning point software. We use these during our planning process and during the design process to hopefully get the opinions of everybody in the room. So you have 1 through 5 on there. Tell me which one you think is the reason the 2016 June bond issue failed. You read the data, we know some of the challenges you face. And what it's showing you is the number of people that have actually clicked. If you want to click on a different answer, do a different number. Call whatever you vote last is what it will remember. Unlike the work we do in Illinois, you can only vote once. Only counts once. So 15 of you have decided, I'm going to show you the answers right now. 53% of you say it's lack of community engagement, voter apathy. Hallelujah. Bonds fail in the state of Kansas as well as nationally because of voter apathy. Not dollars, not cents, not scope. I'll show it to you in a few minutes when we go through our track record. Example would be Liberal. As you know, Liberal in 2009 tried to run the bond issue. It was hammered. It was hammered because the board came to us and said, here's the scope of work. We want you, we hear you're good at bonds, pass it for us. That's the wrong way to approach the bond issue. The right way to do it is say, let's get the community to engage in that process and help decide the scope and see what the paying threshold is. The other issue in Liberal was they did not take into account the minority community. They were not vocal, but they voted. They were afraid to say stuff in meetings. These clickers helped bring that opinion out. The reason this bond passed was we got those people involved. It was a 10 mil increase. We also had to go to the people that own the housing in that community, where a lot of the minority live, to help them educate their people that live there why it was good for them to vote yes. Ultimately, the reason it passed, though, was they understood that every child in that district had to benefit from the outcome of the election. They had a tremendous equity and parity issue and challenge between buildings, haves and have-nots. That election solved that problem. $127 million. The one that failed was well less than $100 million. So, how do we go about doing that? Well, obviously we can show blocks and we can have kids put together Legos. We do all that. Again, low-hanging fruit. At the end of the day, the interactive process is using the system we just described with you, but it's also by understanding who's voting, why they're voting, and what they're going to buy. And we're going to show you some numbers here in Hayes. We've done the homework already with some proprietary systems we own. You can't get them unless you hire us on how we do that. We're going to walk you through that. The first thing we do is help decide what's the guiding principles in the roadmap. The guiding principles are what we test everything against when it comes to community consensus building. As an example, in this case, this is Salina's guiding principles. We passed their bond issue recently. Their guiding principles were flexibility and adaptability. That word was something that the parents in that community said was important to them, but the district had not focused on when they started to do their initial planning. They also talked about quality of facilities and equity of opportunity between both high schools. We had to solve the problem of the two Salina high schools having equity between both of them. It was a big part of getting all the parents in that community to buy into it. We're going to talk to you about Salina being different than a lot of districts of Kansas in terms of it being upside down in terms of the number of parents in that community versus the non-district voters. So we'll tease you with that and come back to you with those answers in a minute. How we come up through and collect and analyze that data, I'm going to let Amber walk you through specifically how we analyze your facilities and collect that data that's used to put together the scope of a bond issue.
So John just talked through this step one, the blue step over here. So now we're kind of talking about, okay, now we've engaged stakeholders, we've gotten guiding principles, now what do we do? Well, now we have to have data to back up. We can't expect them to make educated decisions unless we have data to back that up. So the next step is all focused on gathering that information and providing it to the voters. So here's just one snapshot of some building assessments that we did in Salina. These are some categories I have popped up here that we based those assessments off of. The left side shows all bricks and mortar. The right side is educational assessments. It's so important to focus on both of those, and I don't think everyone does that. That's a differentiator for us because we want to make sure we're looking at your buildings holistically. Architects, our engineers, our educational planners are walking through those buildings and assessing them 100% completely. Giving each building, in essence, a report card. So very quickly you can see as a board what kind of grades that building has and where the need is. And then we can distill that information down even further into a simple, easy to read radar. So just using colors, it's easy to understand where the need is in this building. So in this example here, seeing a lot of the red means this building's got some need. If it had just green on it, that would mean that building's in good shape. So this is an easy way we can get that information out to the voters and help them to understand. Again, you all said voter apathy, so you understand they didn't have enough information. Here's where we get that information to all the voters.
Let's go back just real quick. This is the number one thing. Operational savings. As school board members, you're constantly battling how to use tax dollars to get them into the classroom. Politicians hammer on you guys religiously on that topic. They hammer on us on that. At the end of the day, this process has to create a solution that allows you to tell the voters, whatever the solution is, we're going to help reduce operating costs. Doesn't matter how much it is, but it has to reduce costs. At the end of the day, voters are willing to raise their taxes. They know you're being efficient with their dollars, particularly if you can tell them it's going to help put more dollars in the classroom instead of paying it to the electrical utility company or to somebody that's going to manage your HVAC system. This process we go through generates those data-driven numbers so you can stand up in a public meeting and talk about that.
So in the case of North Little Rock's master plan, we showed the district how they can save $8 million operational annually.
So now I'd like to pull you again. We kind of want to just look at, based off that information, just who's in the room tonight. What do you think the biggest facility challenge is at Hayes High School today? You can see these categories kind of focus around some of that stuff I was already talking about, some of the educational aspects, some of the bricks and mortar systems aspects as well. A few more chime in.
You're good.
Wow, I am not surprised. Because I was just out here and we were talking about how big of an issue this is. So it's great to know everyone understands that mechanical system is something that we would need to make sure, not only to address, but to make sure the voters understand that that's something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, this is interesting. What gets high is good. Not one person in this room thought 21st century learning area was important. What's not said is sometimes as important as what is said.
So that's the part I'm going to speak about next, so we can just keep going.
Yes, so take it away, Jim. Let's talk about their vision.
Let's talk about 21st century learning.
I didn't expect this one. Okay, so again, a lot of firms talk about hyperboles about how we go about customizing vision. Here's the one guarantee I can tell you about the OR group is we will make sure that your vision is customized to the patrons and the educators in Hays, Kansas. We did that in Salina, Kansas, where we passed a $110 million bond issue. Interesting part about this opportunity was, they really wanted to talk about 21st century learning and the next generation of learning environment. What we found out was a challenge, here upside down. They didn't have enough parents or vested voters to pass this bond issue, and John's going to talk about that more in just a second. Okay, so we had to strategically have a message with the non-vested voters in order to pass this bond issue. Again, step 3, let's talk about discovering dreams. What do you want to do, both short-term and long-term range goals related to educational needs? Again, we talk to your community, your teachers, your parents, and we want you to have the students to have a voice. Talk to the students, they'll tell you exactly what's wrong with their facilities and what would engage them more. Let me ask you a question. What is that a picture of? To help you, look at the rows and rows of rocks. Anybody know? This is a 2000 BC archaeological dig of a classroom. What's that? That's an early American classroom. Notice the rows and rows of desks? That is a picture I took last week at the client of ours classrooms. So 4,000 years of education have gone by. The educational learner has changed because they don't have to rely on the teachers for all their information. And learning has changed. But we are still putting our kids in rows and rows of desks, which is only one learning modality, and that's lecturing, which we all know by research is one of the worst ways for kids to learn and retain knowledge. We also know, related to skill sets of the future for employers, teaming in 1970 was one of the winning Harvard top 10. Today, collaboration and teaming is huge. So my question to educators, how the heck do you do that in a 28 by 28 box? Not easy. Hard job for our teachers. I talk about this all the time related to national presentation on 21st century environment. Here's what I will tell you is, this needs to be defined by this community. 21st century learning should be defined by you. We do know that active learning is important, project-based learning, places for robots to be built, places for high-tech areas for kids to learn in. Student-focused. The biggest things we heard at Garden City was, there is no place for us as students. So we have social commons in those places where they can get really strong relationships with their fellow students. Talk about decreasing your problems with kids, create spaces like that. Best way for kids to learn, storytelling. How many of you remember one great time back when you were learning when you were small, remember a story you told your teacher told you? Places where kids can act out, and again, places would have multi-ways for learning modalities, not just lecturing. Technology, it's not just a tool, it's a way of life. The question is, are you using it so it advances your educational process? And lastly, authentic learning environments. Whether it's a culinary arts lab in Garden City, or it's an EMT simulation area in Salina, Kansas, kids want to be in real-life learning environments in their schools. Here's the last thing I'll leave you with. Working with the American Architects Foundation out of Washington, D.C., with the Gates Foundation, looking at personalized learning. Talking at A4 Elite conferences, which I do all the time. What we know is educators in the state of Kansas are rethinking their learning environments. The days of rows and rows of boxes of classrooms is going away. Okay? It's important that you understand that. Now, here's the deal. A lot of districts, short-term, can't change all of their learning environments, and nor should they. What I would tell you is, what we're telling our clients is you may want to consider incubators to change. That may be a small area in every one of your schools, or your instructors play with these things and use these, because it will be a catalyst for change. We think that's really important. This is what's coming. It is actually here today. So, with that, all those guiding principles, all those things we talked about, discovering a dream, we're now going to test it. We're going to go back to your teachers, we're going to go back to your students, we're going to go back to your student or to your community, and make sure, through our tools, that we're all on the same page about what's important to this community. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to my friend John Clark.
You know, one of the things when we do that testing with guiding principles is how do you test them is different. You know, you can have community meetings, you can use the audience response system, but we do a lot of polling through automated polling systems that we have to gauge your community, and not necessarily just the community. That's why I asked, are we on the record? I care about the community, but you know who I really care about? Those that vote. At the end of the day, they're going to dictate the outcome of the election. And sadly, in America, not a lot of parents vote, and not a lot of people in the community vote. You had 27% turnout in your last election. We'll talk about ways to change that, but at the end of the day, we poll people that are going to actually dictate the outcome of your election more than we do just poll the community at large. How do we go through that process to get what Jim talked about, is testing and refining and building that consensus long before the election day? Well, obviously we talked about ways to engage the community with just the tools, but at the end of the day, the one that was a big deal here in Garden City was, again, the minority participation. You don't have that challenge today, but I will tell you, when we pulled Garden City, the first thing they said was the high school's going to be about 100 million. So the first thing we did was test whether in western Kansas, you remember this a little while ago, could actually pass a $100 million plus bond issue, just from a perception standpoint. You know what, it wouldn't pass. So we knew just from the polling, I don't care what the solution was, it wasn't going to pass just because of the magnitude of the bond issue. So we knew it had to be less. When we pulled it at 95 million, had a good chance of passing. Actually got us about another 8% passage. And then obviously getting the minority community engaged in this one as well was important. We had a separate group that worked with the minority. But at the end of the day, trying to get an award-winning thing that they could focus on. They really wanted a calling card for their community more than they said just their high school or their district. It passed. Understanding that during the planning process is critical because you go down a path doing planning and go, hey, here's a great solution everybody in the room wants. And it doesn't pass because you didn't test some of those things with polling. We're a little different, and again, as Amber pointed out in the thing below that gray bar, our in-house team, we have a full social media team that works with you. Most districts in Kansas can no longer afford public relations as a full-time position, sadly. Disappointing, but at the end of the day, they can't afford it. We have social media teams. We have committees that develop material, groups of people that develop material for you. That's all they do. They specialize in that in bonds. And then obviously people like Troy and I that work with the community engagement, work with our architects and engineers to do that. Let me back up. The in-house voter analysis, we have an individual, that's all they do is do voter analysis. We're going to show you some of those results here for Hayes in just a second. We're going to leave you with two numbers tonight that I want you to remember if you can, and it gets a little confusing, but 20-60-20. Anybody heard of the 20-60-20 rule of school bonds? 20% of the people in Hayes are going to vote against this bond issue no matter what you say or do. Doesn't matter. We know that because of the bonds Jim and I and Amber worked on. We've done 2 elections where the only thing on the ballot was, do you want a school? One burned down, one flooded. It was a K-Cole building. First time, 79% yes. Second time, 81% yes. So we know that 20% of people are going to vote no matter what you say or do. The other 20% are probably people sitting in this room that are going to vote yes, even if it triples their taxes. I don't want to tell you that those two sides aren't important because they are, but at the end of the day, the way bonds pass is you focus on that 60% in the middle with good, credible information to defeat apathy amongst them. Our process, once we get the consensus of the community built, is to make sure apathy does not defeat our election. The other issue is the 70-70. Jim pointed out in Salina they were upside down. We're going to show you tonight where Hayes is with their 70-70 rule. Our goal is to get 70% of your vested voters registered and get 70% of those registered voters to the polls on election day. And we'll show you why that's important in just a minute. But it's called the 70-70 rule. If that happens, you can almost guarantee you'll have success on election day. What is a vested voter? A vested voter is a parent in this district or a staff member that lives in the district and can vote. That's a vested voter. Everybody else is non-vested. Both sides are important. And we break them up into 2 different camps when we do our analysis because their expectations, what they want out of schools, are different. So the way you communicate with them has to be different, and the message, while similar, is delivered in a different manner. You can see up here the non-vested voter cares first and foremost about taxes. Well, mom and dad, they care about taxes, but it's typically number 8. Vested voters care about educational performance. Non-vested voters care, but they really want to know how it ranks from test scores. In Salina's case, they were upside down, so we had to convince the non-vested community that it was a community issue that would affect home values, resale value, and job opportunities, more than it was important to talk about how it would create educational opportunities. The way we do that is to our own process. We have a 2-path approach to running bond elections. The state of Kansas is a godsend. They give you the luxury of being able to use taxpayer dollars to factually educate the electorate. A lot of districts, say, here's our scope of work, we've worked as a community, now yes committee, take it and run it. We don't do that, that's not the way we work. About 85% of our effort is on the left side here, where we focus on fact-based education that is run by the district and run by our team to ensure we've defeated apathy amongst all elected. So my question to you would be is what percentage of parents voted at each one of your schools in a June election? If you don't know, probably don't. We can tell you we know. In Salina's case, Liberals, Garden City, and we'll tell you what number needs to be in Hayes, because we'll do the analysis ourselves at our very first meeting. The other side is the vote yes side. I call this the icing on the cake. This is the cake, this is the icing. If you don't do the thing on the left, the one on the right will fail no matter what. And if you prove it time and time again, parents do not engage today, do not come to meetings at night. Dual income households struggle with getting parents to commit the time and energy it takes to work on, run, lead, and pass a yes committee effort. So we spend a lot of time on the left side. That's why we have a team of people that works closely with you to make that happen. To do that, we have to be very organized. We have a very detailed message calendar that every week, what's the message that goes out, but more importantly, what are the channels we're going to use to distribute that information to the non-vested and vested voters. In this case, you can see the channels up here for this district. There was 5. Here's what we've also learned. I can't send out a general brochure 7 times and hope that it gets to the audience. It's a brochure that talks about overcrowding. 1 week. The next week it may be in social media where we're strictly talking about HVAC or safety and security issues. That's all channels are talking about that week. Next week it's another topic. And we do that as we get down because at the end of the day, the patrons today are just so hung up on just small bite-sized information in order for them to understand it. We can't give them everything and expect them to absorb it. We have to give them small bites. Our process does that. Again, the channels are different in every community. Some districts have a strong newspaper. In the case of Liberal, newspaper was against it in the first election, was for it in the second election. Newspaper may be important, may not. Depends on the community. I don't know Hayes well enough to know whether it's important or not, but I will tell you, those are things we analyze. Notes home with students at elementary school work great. When was the last time you gave a high school kid a note that made it home ever? Social media, we have a full in-house team that either can post for the district on their behalf, monitor your social media channels, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, and so forth, Instagram, and actually post on your behalf and monitor it. We have a full-time team that all they do is develop materials. Graphically, that work, educate, and promote, but most importantly, educate and factually defeat apathy. Do we do yes stuff for yes committees? Absolutely. But we message them and channel it based on what is happening in the community. In this case, you can see on the left one, crowded environments. This case, they wanted to see it. I don't believe you're crowded. Well, here's where kids are learning. Those are the types of things that we work with. We have libraries and libraries of information that we can give to your committees to work on. Monitoring social media. By the way, John, this is the superintendent in Spring Hill. We just passed the bond issue there. We assume you'll be doing that on election day. Invest in yes voters in terms of dealing with different pages for everybody in terms of how they promote stuff social media. It is so critical today. As a matter of fact, Facebook did a study recently that said moms today learn more about how their school is performing from Facebook than they do from teachers or district website or district literature. So social media is there and we use it to our advantage. 70-70, I promise you how we show you how Hayes would shape up the 70-70. We know you have about 13,000 active registered voters in this district. You had roughly a 27% turnout. We're going to assume next election, let's say, has a 30% turnout if it's a walk-in. I would not recommend walk-in ballot ever in the state of Kansas. You are given the godsend of a mail ballot that's allowed 2 weeks to return ballots and get dual income parents to the polls. So that means roughly you need 1,950 votes to pass this election. We know you have roughly 3,067 students. That may have changed since we ran that number. But if we do the math on how many kids are in the district and look at the number of parents, again, that's the guesstimate on our part. We have to get the actual math. You have roughly 3,220 available parents in the community, or what we call available vested voters with staff. 70-70. We get 70% of them registered, 70% of them to the polls. Look what happens. You have 2,254 people that are vested in the outcome of this election, and this is what you need. So the question becomes, what should we be focused on? We should be making sure we defeat apathy amongst the vested audience. In the case of Salina, we said they were upside down. No matter what they did on this side, they could not get it higher than what typically shows up at their polls. So the messaging had to be different in Salina. This worked in Dodge City, this worked in Liberal. We run a lot of bond issues, as Amber said, all over the state of Kansas. This is what this team's worked on. We can show you bonds after bonds after bonds that our firm as a whole has done. We're number one in K-12 in the world for a reason. We want to show you what we've worked on, because that's so important. But the most important thing to take away from this, and hopefully you can read it, here's Spring Hill this year that just passed a bond issue, 72%, $82 million, a 3.6 mil increase. This is Spring Hill when we worked with them in 2011. It passed, it got 55%. It was a no mill increase. And you go, whoa, wait a minute, no mill increase and it got less percentage yes, how's that work? Well, that goes to show you how important the content is on the election. This one in 2011 was building athletic facilities at their high school and adding on and doing things that quite frankly are a target for those who oppose election. Knowing that, we had to make sure that the scope of work, even for this little $39 million bond issue, was not going to defeat this election. But it shows you that no matter how big the scope is or what the mill is, it's really how well of consensus you built and how much you pull in data measure to make sure what's on the ballot has a very good chance of passing long before election day. So with that, I'll let Troy talk a little bit about some of those challenges.
John mentioned a couple of those roadblocks. We notice in every district that we go into, there's two things there for sure. One is it's not easy. There is no bond that's easily passed. We've seen bonds with 0% mill increase that don't pass in some areas before we come on board. So it's not easy. The second thing is every community is unique. Everyone is different. Hayes is no different from that. There are lightning rods that come out that we have to poll and do surveys on to make sure that we know ahead of time. If that's a part of the scope of work that's been happening throughout this process, and we see that we're getting to that point, we need to ask those questions before it comes to the board to make sure that we have the right plan going forward. We're proactive in that piece and in that education of that piece as we go forward. A couple of examples, deferred maintenance. You know, there's going to be a lot of boards that whenever they put deferred maintenance onto a bond, that they get questioned on whether or not they've done their job at that point in time, right? Are there dollars and cents that have come back? Why haven't we paid for these things along the way? Well, you've got since 1977, since your last major renovation, and very little money that's been able to go and extra money towards upgrading things. That's tough to keep that ahead. But that's a part that we have to educate. The sales tax piece, one community that we're in, 60% or greater renters in one community. Well, if we didn't talk to those landlords ahead of time and help them to understand what was going on and help to educate them on those, we weren't going to get their vote, we weren't going to get the renters' vote. We've been in communities where they've written on the signs, if you vote yes, your rent will go up. That's their sign. And so if you don't have that connection and that communication with them beforehand, you're in trouble. So we have to look for those things ahead of time. We're going to poll and we're going to be proactive. I want you to focus on a couple of things here, and this is really Hayes Senate. Look at the blue pie, okay? Look at the blue squares. On the left, you see 49% of your current registered voters are between the ages of 26 to 55. Where are the majority of your vested voters at? In that age range, right? In June, your election, 58% of the votes that came in were 56 plus years old.
Yes,
Well, but so what a great thing to learn here, right? The votes are there. John explained that in the 70-70. The opportunities are there. The opportunity to share that is there. But you have to get the right message out to the people for them to be able to understand. Okay, what are all the dots up on the screen? I thought they were cows. He was wrong. This is where every one of your voters in June voted. This is proprietary information that we have. No one else has the ability to use this, is what we have. This is information to the very street that they live on, every voter that voted. Think about the power of being able to take your vested voters, your people that live